All right, welcome everyone to tonight's school committee meeting. I appreciate everyone coming out. I had hoped to really have one agenda item, continued discussion on FY20 proposed budget. I had hoped to do this last week at our regular meeting, but I just couldn't be there. And we have our public budget hearing 8 days from now, so I felt like we should have one more meeting where we talked about the budget. There's been some work done with the Finance Committee and the Board of Selectmen and the Town Finance admin team. So I wanted to go over that and kind of make sure we were all on the same page as we drive towards the budget hearing next Thursday. So as we all know, our initial request for an increase for FY20 was about $1.4 million. What I had the first sheet that we're going to look at, what I did was I took the budget models that we review when we're in joint meeting with the FinCom and the Board of Selectmen, and we've had at least 3 of those this year. So you see the first column is the FY19 actual, not actuals, but the way it was modeled in FY19. Then we had a memo on a model on February 4th. Then we had another one on February 25th, and then we had the most recent one, which came out last Friday on March 8th. When we look at the February 4th column with our $1.4 million projected increase and the other increases for other town departments and other line items, there was a budget deficit of $548,000. At the subsequent February 25th meeting, we had, or the town finance admin team had closed that gap. We hadn't done anything on our side prior to that. They closed it, they moved the levy limit up and had changed some other numbers. And you can see on the third to last column from the right, you can see the delta in each of the line items from the February 4th meeting to the February 25th meeting. For instance, the levy limit went up $111,000, and that helped close the budget gap. In addition, the debt service went down $300,000, and then with other movement in the various line items, they closed that gap to about $206,000. Obviously, that was still a deficit, and we started taking a look at it from our side, and we presented at a meeting of the chairs some movement where we eliminated $92,000 from our initial request, primarily through, we had a couple of staff vacancies that hadn't been filled this year, and we decided we could leave those vacant for the time being. And we also realized we had a teacher, a longtime teacher retiring, who's at the top of the pay scale. So we assumed that if we hire a little lower on the pay scale, we can save some money there. That $92,000 dropped our request to about $1.3 million from the little over 1.4. Subsequently, the finance admin team also readjusted quite a few of their numbers. The levy limit actually went down $150,000 from the last time we looked at it. It went down a total of $39,000 from the February 4th memo. And they dropped the debt service amount by another $75,000. So that's a $375,000 adjustment from the first model we saw on February 4th. In addition, they dropped the employee and retiree benefits from their initial estimate of $9.9 million down to about $9.6 million, so another $320,000. Those are the biggest, along with our $92,000, those things are the biggest driver that made the budget model balance out. It has a slight surplus now, $3,000. So that's good news in the sense that between our movement and the adjustment in the town model, we have a budget that we can go to town meeting with that's in balance. Obviously, from our perspective, $92,000 is a hit. I mean, at that point, we're no longer truly level service the way we've been talking about it. But talking with the superintendent and the admin team, they feel comfortable that they can continue to make that budget work and deliver the level of services and delivery of curriculum that we require as a community and as a school committee. What it does do is, or the next thing I wanted to talk about is school choice. So if we go to the next sheet, you'll see our initial request, the $92,000 that we removed, and the adjusted 1.3 number. The next thing we want to think about is school choice. So I put the 2019 estimated to show where we're driving towards this year. The big item there is that our expenses, the amount we're spending out of school choice, is significantly higher than when we were at this point last year discussing the budget. We thought we would end 2019 with about 1.2 million in school choice, but because of the increase in out-of-district expenses and that requirement that we meet that through extra spending out of school choice, we're going to be a little bit over $1 million, about a $200,000 decrease. We expect to take in receipts of about $400,000 next year. We know we're going to spend 250 of that. We have an annual salary offset to support our spending on our staff. The question is do we want to spend more? The most obvious requirement, if we want to continue to move towards tuition-free full-day kindergarten, we need to find a way to finance that next installment, which is about $75,000. Everything that we've done on the appropriation budget does not include that next phase-in. If we spend that, if we authorize that, that'll take the amount that we're expecting to spend up to $325,000, which is a little less than what we expect to take in, 400 versus 325, for, we hope, an increase of $75,000. It would keep our balance up over $1 million, close to 1.07, $1.08 million. The things that we talked about at the initial budget meeting with the Board of Selectmen and the FinCom back in early January, the continued phase-in, if we were going to be able to do extra spending or additive spending, continuing to phase in tuition-free full-day kindergarten, potentially an assistant principal at the Russell Street School, the only building that does not currently have an assistant principal, mental health counselor, and a part-time HR administrator. And of course, we all know there was discussion in the community about adding a second school resource officer. And the reason I have that separate here is that wouldn't be covered in our budget, no matter whether it was authorized or not. That would be covered in the police budget. The appropriated budget, the increase of 1.3 million, does let us get the first 2 years of the full-day kindergarten phase-in into the appropriated budget, which was a key goal. It allows us to meet the increased out-of-district tuition costs, some of which we incur this year and some of which we expect to incur next year. It also allows us to, we expect to spend more on case transportation. That was another driver, and then our HVAC contract is up. All that is covered by the current $1.3 million by virtue of us leaving a couple of those staff positions unfilled and actuating the retirement savings right now. What we're not able to do, or at least not in the appropriated budget, is any of those other additional spendings, except, as I talked about earlier, if we did put the $75K in for the next part of the phase-in for tuition-free full-day kindergarten, that's where we'd be at $325,000 of expected $400,000. So that's kind of where we are. Talking to the superintendent, and I'll let him put his point of view in a moment, I think we're good in the sense that we can go to our public hearing and present that budget and disperse it across the cost centers and show the impact, the growth year over year, and be confident that as we know it now, we will be able to, continue to be the high achieving district and provide the services required. I don't feel that we're additive, other than the continuing our commitment to tuition-free full-day kindergarten. Will be in year 3 of 5. But there's no additional increase in staffing or services on the town side either. The one thing that I would say is that the model presented in terms of the levy limit and things like the debt service and employee retiree benefits has been volatile, more volatile than I really would have expected it to be. I'm going to ask, send an email to make sure we understand why. I don't think at this point, it's going to change the picture on the ground the way we have it right now. I will say that if the state budget process, because we're making pretty significant assumptions on that right now, we expect Chapter 70 and local aid to be relatively level funded, really level funded, but things can change. And they have changed in the last couple of years. Sometimes Chapter 70 goes up, it's only some tens of thousands of dollars, it's not, materially changing. But my attitude would be that any increases that we get, any good news we get, that $92,000 that we left on, out of the budget in terms of level servicing needs to come back to us before we, as a town, think about adding other resources. There were other things that other departments would have asked for, did ask for, if they could have had what they call their mission budget. The school resource officers one, there's more staffing at the highway department, there's different things that they ask for. But thinking about those, any potential for that, I really feel like we need to make sure that we're communicating to the Board of Selectmen and the FinCom that $92,000 is impactful to us, and that we would expect to get that back before anybody, including us, made any determinations about additive staffing or services of other types. So, Superintendent Klenji, am I stating your position correctly in terms of the $1.3 million increase?
Excuse me, you have. This budget allows us to continue with the staffing that we need to move our school district forward. I just wanted to point out that through efficiencies that we created in the current budget, we already have one mental health counselor, so that position is secure. So when we see a mental health counselor there, it's not the one that we already have on staff. So I feel confident that this budget will do what we need it to do. And we have to remember that our out-of-district costs were significant this year in terms of increase, and we were concerned about taking care of those costs and being able to move forward with our current staffing configuration. Granted, we had a decrease of 2 ed assistants, but we were able to absorb that through a rearrangement of our ed assistants within our district. And things happen that we can't project next year, we will figure out a way to deal with it. So I'm happy to certainly endorse this proposal, and I'd just like to thank everybody that was involved in the budget process. It was a long one, and one that was somewhat unpredictable for a period of time. So I'm thrilled that we have some final numbers that we can use. So thank you.
Comments, discussion?
I'll go last. I don't think I'll go first.
Erica?
I would just say that I would be in favor of continuing to fund the full-day kindergarten. I think that's a commitment we made to the community, and that we should, if we have the ability to do it through school choice at this point, that we should continue to do that.
I'd agree with Erica. I don't think we can back away from that at this point. Like Erica mentioned, we made a commitment a couple of years ago that we were going to do this in over a 5-year period, and I think we need to continue on that path. I will say that being part of the budget process this year was a little disheartening with some of the things that we saw with the FinCom and the selectmen. I would also agree that before any new hiring takes place in the town, we need to get that $92,000 back and on the appropriated budget.
Jim?
Nothing else to add, but I do, I guess, the feeling about full-day kindergarten. I think you guys have done a great job with all the back and forths. There's clearly been a lot of work on these numbers, so thank you.
Yeah, and I support too our commitment to maintaining the path to full-day kindergarten. I mean, that was something that we heard, you know, and then when we committed to doing it, I want to see that, you know, that happens. I'd like to maybe think about, as we move towards, you know, towards the future, not necessarily going with it as a policy, but maybe going it more as budget guidance here, that we try to, while we can, target about a 5% reserve or 5% ending balance in our chapters school choice account there. And the 5% comes from, I didn't just pick it out of the air, the regional districts are allowed to hold 5% back in terms of what they call excess and deficiency, was what their equivalent of the school choice funds that they use for unanticipated expenses or contributing to the budget there. I don't want to call it a policy because I don't want us to be fixed in, because we can't count on that money every year. But I think as we plan our budget, if we start seeing that we're consistently driving that down lower and lower, we know that we are draining resources, type of thing there. And it might also make it a little stronger for us to tell the FinCom and the Board of Selectmen that's what we're targeting there. And if they don't, you know, if we don't have agreement on that number, well, you know, one, it's our number to control, but we can also then discuss more concretely the ramifications of that, just as they're holding to their budgeting policy for putting various amounts into different accounts and other things there because it's sound practice. Us maybe adopting similar guidance might be sound on our part also.
I personally agree with that, and I look at it in two ways. One is we can use that policy or that guidance to protect ourselves from the bottom, the floor, but I think we also need to be cognizant of it relative to the ceiling.
Right.
Because I don't think it does any of us a service. We've carried, I want to argue, Steve, Mark, what do you think about 1.6? Maybe that's as high as we've ever gotten in the school choice account.
Yeah, a little over 1.5, 1.6, somewhere in there, a couple of years ago.
That might be too frugal on our part.
Right, exactly. At that point, you know, are we robbing? I wouldn't say, so that's not a good analogy, but are we cheating ourselves out of an opportunity by being too conservative? And similar to the numbers that the policies that you talk about on the town side relative to stabilization funds and things like that. There's a balance that you're trying to strike where you're being conservative and it's good fiscal planning, but you can also, strangle the baby at the same time, So you got to be careful about where that balance is. So I agree that looking for, that range and using it to guide us, to protect us in both directions, I think is worthwhile. I also think having it in place and being clearly communicated and used by us sets an expectation with the other audiences, primarily the Board of Selectmen or FinCom, but could be anybody, as to why we're doing it that way. And, you're right, it jives with their planning and then their policies.
And I think even if we just codified it as a budget guidance memo to the superintendent
That's a good idea.
there, in terms of then also stating that our preference, in the purposes that we're holding that money back for unanticipated out-of-district expenses, unanticipated single cost pieces there, we should be careful about putting it as a recurring cost. Right, just so that, there's some, we're all talking about the same thing, we can give it to the selectmen and the FinCom to say, this is the guidance that we're building our budget on. And I think it's just to strengthen our practice.
Yeah, I agree.
Just a question, Steve, one of the big things that caught us by surprise, obviously, was the out-of-district spending this year. Do we see that as a trend that's going to continue, or is it up in the air, or do we think it's going to decrease in the future?
I know it's going to continue for next year because some of those kids that we're covering this year, we also have for next year. And then I'd have to get with our PPS director and project out and see how many kids might age out of the system, but then we don't know who's going to move in as well. So it's always a tough call to try to say if it's going to go up or down. But
You bring up a good point, Matt, though, and there's two contributors. One is the students themselves that are receiving services, the amount of services that are required, the providers that are necessary to meet them. But then we have to think about, too, the rates that those providers are charging. There's no question that's going to go up. It
Correct.
never goes down.
correct. In fact, there's 3 letters on my desk from 3 of the schools that we use that are seeking rate hikes, and the rates are approved by the state. by the board of the state. And there's 3 letters on my desk from 3 of the out-of-district placements that we use that are seeking rate hikes for next year that are in the 6 to 7% range. So, and we can't control that, because that's controlled by the state board, so.
Yeah.
But that would be good in our presentation material to make sure people understand the costs that we don't control, but we're
Right.
still obligated to cover.
And what's happening out there is more and more districts, including our district, have a critical mass to offer in-house programs for students that we couldn't offer programs before. So the private schools that we send some of our students to are revamping their programs and taking care of the target audience that's changing for them. And as a result, their costs are increasing as well. So you're not only getting the 5-6% cost, but sometimes you're getting a 15 or 20% if they open up a new program. So we're just having students in all schools across Massachusetts that require greater needs than we've seen before, and greater needs equates to greater or higher expenses.
And the other comment I would make is I echo Superintendent Clenchey's point of view that $1.3 million is a significant increase. It's more than we've gotten in the last several years. We expected the salary increase. We can plan for that. Things like HVAC contracts, we know they're coming down the road, and they're not, we have to plan for them, but they're not really the problem. The issue was the out-of-district tuition costs, but what I wouldn't say I'm happy about, but at least I'm satisfied that we planned correctly, and we did have reserves in place where we're able to meet that without interrupting delivery of other services or reducing staffing levels or going back to the town and saying, we can't do this on our own. We need to find a way as a community to make this work. So that's good. The other thing that I'm satisfied with is that we were able to move the first 2 years of the phase-in for tuition-free kindergarten from school choice into the appropriated budget. That was a key goal for us, and that's going to happen. So that we should be very happy with that, and for 2 reasons. One is that's where it needs to be, but it also allows us to continue, I think, without any real financial stress, at least hopefully, on school choice to continue to go. And I don't see any reason why, or I'm reasonably optimistic at this point in time that we'll get there, that we'll be able to meet the obligation that we brought on to ourselves for all the right reasons. I do know that the town is going through a lot of change administratively. In talks with the FinCom and the Board of Selectmen and town staff, we're all very hopeful that this will give us the impetus to reevaluate the mechanisms and the process for how we do this, all of us. There was talk about the budget summit used to be in November, and it kind of started creeping back past the holidays because people don't want to meet on a Saturday when it's that time of year, which is totally understandable. But at the same time, we feel like maybe we close the window a little bit too much, and it gets more difficult to make it work. So that's one idea. And then the way we model, maybe now we get some fresh eyes on it, and we can model a little differently that makes it a little more transparent and easier to follow. As a town, and I've harped on this, and I'll celebrate the loudest the day I don't have to say this anymore, but until the state deals with the fact that they're level funding state aid, things are going to continue to be difficult. The only question is how difficult. It'll never be easy to make the budget work until that changes. Obviously, we've heard talk about, we did our own resolution supporting the reevaluation of the Chapter 70 funding formula and the foundation budget. There's a couple bills out there. Hopefully something will happen, but nobody's really talked about which Peter gets robbed to pay which Paul, or who's going to get taxed at a higher rate, because that's what it will come down to really affect any significant material change to the way public education is funded in Massachusetts. But I think we can make it work. I think the $1.3 million is, I appreciate the the FinCom and the Board of Selectmen understanding that, that had to be there. I mean, as a town, we've taken advantage of the new growth we've had in terms of the financial windfall that it's provided, and the other departments besides the school department have benefited tremendously over the past several years. They've been able to add staff. They've gone up on a percentage basis higher the last several years than the school department has, and all for all good reasons. This year, we will go up a little bit faster than them, primarily because of that unexpected out-of-district tuition increase. If it hadn't been for that, I think we would have stayed right in line with where we've been the last couple of years. And so that's, again, a tribute to the stewardship that we're providing as a school committee and the execution on the budget that the administration manages after we give them the authorization for the funding. So, taking that, this discussion, we will model the $1.3 million increase into the presentation next Thursday and vote on it. Any other comments or questions?
I'm just going to, one other thing on the school choice funds here, and it may be a bridge too far, because I think it depends on how we want to look at school choice. We get them every year, so it is a recurring revenue stream, but just a little on the unpredictable side. So I can see at some level we carrying some of the fixed budget, the 250 of salary supplement out of there. However, I think we got to watch that, because it is it's an annual expense there, and it's probably too much to try to see how we would slide that over to the appropriated budget and maybe pick up some of our own capital expenses out of, some of the more one-time type things that we can manage on a year-to-year basis out of the school choice account, rather than automatically allocating $250,000 of it to the recurring budget. So there might be some discussion about how that moves forward. I'm almost suggesting to the progressive point is if we could pull $100,000 out of our capital request and cover it with school choice money, contingent on the town putting that $100,000 we pulled out of their budget into their stabilization account or something, where we could then, as a town, net out a positive piece there, rather than us trying to take money out of the town's capital budget and then hoping that we're going to get enough capital out of here. There might be some different way of us looking at these for managing towards the future, because I suspect, based on Monday's meeting, capital is going to start becoming really tight in the town.
Yeah, it's a good point.
And I don't want us to give up anything out of the town budget where we can get capital pieces there, but at the same time, we're probably going to need to look at different things moving forward.
I think it's a great idea, and I think what I would like to do in terms of running with that is, I think we are where we are this year.
Yep.
And that might be a good thing to bring to the table when we're reevaluating how we do all of this. And like, as I alluded earlier, we're going to have an opportunity with new staffing in place to kind of take another look at how we want to go about this business. And you're exactly right. There was a lot of talk about how much big capital projects do we want to fund inside the levy, and there's you can model the numbers to make it work, but nobody should, your point was valid, it's going to restrict the town's ability on both the town side and the school side to fund capital the way we've done the last, I don't know, at least a half a dozen years. We saw this back when I first got involved in the school committee, and we were paying off the high school bonds inside the levy. They had saved up money to do that, not all of it, but they continued to pay it down inside the levy, and there were motions on town meeting floor because it was getting very difficult. Hard decisions were being made
It was starving.
to move it outside the levy so that we didn't have to, so that we could have more flexibility both in terms of operation and the more recurring capital costs. It never came, we managed, we got across the finish line, but some of the discussion I heard the other night, it sounds like there is some appetite for going back in that direction. And there's reasons for it. Keeping the tax rate down, keeping Littleton relatively affordable to live in. So I wouldn't dismiss it out of hand. But thinking about if we are going to drive towards that, then we need to be reactive in our planning, or proactive in our planning, and how we want to deal with that, and that's a good idea, that maybe school choice for us becomes a, instead of relying on it, on the operating budget. But you're right, we got to finesse that
Right.
money back in.
Because I also think, based on some of the, you mentioned new administration, some of the selectmen are telegraphing that they are questioning some of the things in capital. Not just ours, but, in general, so that I think those discussions will become more pointed once capital starts getting,
They will.
Yeah.
getting restricted.
I mean, we've never, and nobody expects any department to get all their capital requests. And the reason that they're on there is not under the assumption that you are, but to make sure everybody realizes, well, if we don't do it this year, that doesn't mean that the need is going away. And you're right, the process has been fairly straightforward and fairly painless because we've all gotten quite a bit year over year for the past several years because of the position we're in. And you're right, that might not be as easy to do as it has been and will cause, more agita. So yeah, we need to be proactive about that.
I'd also like to see the process begin with safety and ADA requirements and take care of those projects first before any department starts making a capital list. I think it would be cleaner, and we certainly wouldn't be in the position that we were in this year, trying to find enough money to cover the sidewalk costs. Just a retooling of what we're doing, very similar to what PMBC does currently. And I think that could be applied across the entire budgeting process.
All right. Anything else? All right, well, we've started to prepare the presentation. We'll be ready on Thursday. We hopefully will have it, I'll optimistically say by the end of the day, Tuesday. But if it slips to Wednesday, don't yell at us.
Don't panic, it's coming.
To be honest, we're in better shape in terms of understanding how we're going to get there than we have been the last couple of years at this point in the process, so.
But I think the bottom line that we're telegraphing based on our discussion here is we're looking probably to spend $325 out of school choice and the appropriated budget of whatever that number is.
$21,102,192.
Right. And I think we all understand why we're targeting those numbers at this point, so.
All right, well, again, I appreciate everybody coming out and being flexible on a Wednesday, and we'll be ready next Thursday. All right, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Second, all those in favor? Aye. Opposed? None. I'd like to thank LCTV as well. Thank you for coming out on, well, it wasn't short notice, but unexpected. Thank you.